Astronaut John wakes up from his hibernation cycle aboard the spacecraft Odyssey 1. As he stirs from the deep sleep induced by the powerful drugs that kept his body in stasis, he is hit with a familiar but unsettling sense of disorientation. Odyssey 1 is on a monumental mission, traveling all the way to Titan, one of Saturn's moons. The goal is ambitious, to extract vital resources such as methane from Titan, which are desperately needed back on Earth, where the natural supply is dwindling. It's a multi-year journey that has required the crew to adopt an unusual sleep cycle. Every 90 days, they wake from hibernation for routine checks, to communicate with mission control on Earth, and to ensure that they are still on course. Then, after a few short days, they are put back into their drug-induced hibernation for another stretch of the long voyage. As John groggily pulls himself up, he shakes off the remnants of sleep and tries to focus on the task ahead. He isn't alone on the Odyssey 1. Captain Franks, the no-nonsense leader of the mission, and Nash, the spacecraft's aeronautics expert, are also part of the three-man crew. They've become a well-oiled machine, each playing their role in ensuring the success of this high-stakes mission. However, as John tries to regain his bearings, he's unnerved by something. He can't seem to remember his girlfriend Zoe's last name. This may seem like a small, insignificant detail, but for John, it's jarring. Zoe was an essential part of his life back on Earth, and the fact that he's forgetting even basic details about her sends alarm bells ringing in his head. Sensing John's discomfort, Nash tries to comfort him. He explains that the potent drugs they use to induce hibernation can cause memory lapses and even hallucinations. It's all part of the process, Nash assures him. John listens, but the nagging feeling of unease doesn't dissipate. As they begin running checks on the ship's systems, John hears something else that shakes him. Zoe's voice, almost like a whisper in his ear. He knows it's impossible. Zoe is millions of miles away on Earth, but the sound is so vivid that for a moment, he wonders if he's losing his grip on reality. Despite these strange occurrences, the crew manages to complete their tasks. Everything checks out, the ship is functioning as expected, and they send a routine message back to Earth confirming that Odyssey 1 is still on track for the next major milestone, a slingshot maneuver around Jupiter. This complex and dangerous maneuver is designed to increase the ship's speed and propel them toward Titan more efficiently. If they execute it correctly, the rest of the journey should be smooth sailing. With their tasks complete, the crew prepares to return to hibernation. John, now relieved that his memory is starting to come back, recalls how he met Zoe, and this brings him some comfort as he prepares to go back to sleep. The next wake cycle, however, doesn't go as smoothly. John awakens to a sharp pain in his head. As he regains consciousness, he realizes he's been struck by a falling ceiling panel. Dazed, he's soon discovered by Captain Franks and Nash, who quickly assess the situation. It appears that the ship has sustained some damage. There are dents in the hull, and several internal systems seem to be malfunctioning. Yet when they check the ship's computer, it reports no record of any impact or damage. This leaves the crew puzzled and on edge. Captain Franks speculates that the ship may have warped due to the intense structural stress of space travel, but Nash isn't so sure. Nash's paranoia begins to grow. He starts to suspect that something is deeply wrong with the ship, more than they can see on the surface. He becomes convinced that Odyssey 1 has sustained significant structural damage and that attempting the slingshot maneuver around Jupiter could be a death sentence. If the ship can't handle the pressure of the maneuver, it could break apart, killing them all. As Nash's concerns grow, so does his erratic behavior. He begins to question the entire mission, doubting whether they should even attempt to reach Titan. Nash's growing paranoia pushes him to hatch a dangerous plan. He wants to mutiny against Captain Franks. Nash approaches John with his idea, proposing that they reprogram the ship to turn around and head back to Earth. He believes that if they continue toward Titan, they will all die. Nash suggests they wake up early from their next hibernation cycle, giving them enough time to reprogram the ship's systems before Captain Franks notices. John is reluctant but shaken by Nash's intensity. He agrees to go along with the plan, but only if Nash can provide concrete evidence that the ship is compromised. When the next sleep cycle ends, John and Nash awaken early, just as planned. However, things quickly spiral out of control. Nash is losing his grip on reality, spiraling deeper into paranoia. He insists that the ship is falling apart and that they are doomed. John, on the other hand, is starting to experience his own mental breakdown. He's seeing things, hallucinations of Zoe appear throughout the ship. Sometimes he hears her voice calling out to him over the radio. Other times, he dreams that the ship has been catastrophically damaged and he's floating helplessly in the void of space. It's becoming increasingly difficult for him to distinguish between what's real and what's not. Their plan to mutiny is interrupted when Captain Franks appears. It turns out that he had been suspicious of the two men and woke up early to stop them. In a tense confrontation, Franks accuses Nash of trying to sabotage the mission. John, caught in the middle, is torn between his loyalty to Captain Franks and his growing belief that Nash may be right. Despite Nash's protests, Captain Franks and John manage to complete the Slingshot maneuver. The ship survives, but the tension between the crew members reaches a boiling point. After the maneuver, Nash's mental state deteriorates rapidly. He can't remember simple details from his life, like the names of his parents. He becomes fixated on the ship's reactor output, claiming that there's a problem that, if not fixed, will prevent them from reaching Titan. He shows his findings to John, but John, still struggling with his own hallucinations, is skeptical. Nash's paranoia has reached such a level that it's hard to tell whether he's being rational or if he's completely lost touch with reality. Captain Franks, now armed with a pistol, confronts both men. He reveals that someone used John's passcode to tamper with the reactor's output, lowering it to dangerous levels. Franks accuses Nash of sabotage, believing that Nash has become a threat to the mission. In a dramatic standoff, Captain Franks forces Nash back into hibernation, deciding that putting him to sleep is the only way to ensure the mission's success. John watches helplessly as Nash is dragged away, but just before John is put back to sleep, he sees something that chills him to the bone: Captain Franks brutally attacking Nash. When John wakes up in the next cycle, Nash is gone. Captain Franks refuses to explain what happened to him and becomes increasingly aggressive, carrying the pistol with him at all times. John's hallucinations worsen, with Zoe appearing more frequently, sometimes speaking to him through the ship's communication systems. John becomes convinced that Captain Franks murdered Nash, but Franks denies it. Instead, he drops a bombshell revelation. Zoe was never real. She was a fabricated part of a psychological test designed to evaluate John's mental stability during long-duration space travel. John refuses to believe this and turns to the ship's computer for answers. What he discovers is even more shocking. The computer reveals that there never was a crew. John has been alone on Odyssey 1 for the entire mission. His full name is Captain John Nash Franks, and the other crew members were figments of his imagination, hallucinations brought on by the powerful hibernation drugs. Desperate for answers, John reaches out to Zoe one last time. To his surprise, she responds. She tells him that the mission is a lie and that he's not actually in space. Instead, he's been part of a simulation, trapped in a test facility on Earth. The drugs malfunctioned, causing his mind to break down. Zoe urges him to escape the simulation by leaving through the airlock. John is torn. Captain Franks, or what remains of his hallucination, warns him that leaving through the airlock will result in his death. But John, no longer sure of what's real, decides to take the risk. He opens the airlock and steps outside, expecting to find himself in a simulation facility. For a moment, he believes Zoe was right. He sees the interior of what looks like an underground bunker. But as he steps toward an emergency exit, the truth finally hits him. He was hallucinating all along. John is sucked into the void of space, his final moments consumed by the terrifying realization that he was never in control of his own mind. That's all for today, guys. Check these 2 videos if you want to continue binging on some amazing stories. Stay safe and see you next time.